Talk Live.
Welcome to episode number 24 of the Free Talk Cast, where we talk about current events, issues that are important to you, politics, and newsworthy items from a perspective of peace, love, and liberty. And of course, I'm Aria, being joined as always by
Nikki.
And man, it's been a week for me. But before we get into all that, I want to give a quick shout out to our supporters over on Patreon. You can find that at patreon.com/LRNFM. There's also going to be links to it under this YouTube video. Not in the podcast description links, because I don't do that. I probably should. But just go to patreon.com/LRNFM and you can find our Patreon there. And, you can show your love and support. There is a completely free membership tier. You don't really get access to some of the bonus content. Like, you don't get the behind-the-scenes footage where every week I fuck up something and have to go in and fix it. And we usually have an outtake or two as a result of that we throw on our line for our Patreon. So check that out at patreon.com/LRNFM. So over this last week, I went to CVS and I saw there a lot of Black Santas.
Yeah, the Black Santas. I got a kick out of that the first time I saw a Black Santa.
And it brought me no discomfort whatsoever. I was a little surprised because I don't think there were any white Santas.
Really?
I really don't, but I didn't pay attention. I just saw a Black Santa, and this reminded me of some early bullshit from my childhood, where my father, extremely racist, saw a Black Santa at a mall one day, and as we were driving away,
so like a real human being. Oh,
just
my God.
went off about it to my sister and myself and whoever happened to be in the car. I don't remember, probably my grandmother. And things like that, I don't remember what the rant was. I just remember, hey, Black Santa, this really pisses him off, right? Which is crazy.
It's so funny.
It's a fictional character, but
Yeah.
People are like that. They did the same thing with the mermaid character a few years ago when they made the live action mermaid and she was Black, and people were like, how come you have a Black mermaid? Ariel's white. I'm like, Ariel's fictional.
Yeah.
No. Like, she can be whatever character the portrayers want her to be.
Yeah.
Similar, of course, to Santa, who is not real.
I think I got a kick out of it personally because I'm like, it just seemed like, present day, it seemed like some woke nonsense.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's just like they're doing it just to be able to say that there's a Black Santa. And I think it's a little different if it's a human being dressed up as Santa, whatever that happens to be. It's like, okay, that's one thing. But yeah, I was at Hobby Lobby and there were two different Santa mugs and one was black and one was white. And it's just kind of funny, but it's not something you're going to lose any sleep over, hopefully.
No, and I like the idea of inclusion. I think it's a good thing that for Black families who celebrate Christmas that they can find iconography of a Black Jesus and a Black Santa to, make it more part of their filial tradition. And that's great. But here in New Hampshire, there's like 9 Black people in the whole state. So it's a little weird to me, the abundance of Black Santas that I saw. I don't mind them there. I thought about buying a Black Santa just because, I know that it would piss off my dad, who's of course dead and isn't going to be aware of it anyway. But that was actually the joke that I made that led to this nonsense in my life.
Yeah.
Because I posted this joke about wanting to buy a Black Santa just to piss off my racist father, of course, who's dead. Right.
Yeah.
And I'm an atheist, so I don't believe he's down there looking at heaven going, oh, I'm so disappointed in you. But it's funny. It's a funny idea to me. And I'm enough of a troll that I would do that just because I find the idea funny. Now, I did not do it, but regardless, my grandmother saw this and started defending. No, she didn't defend my dad's character. She did actually. She basically told me that he wasn't a racist because he had helped. She knew he had helped some old Black people. And like, okay, I understand that
That's like when people say like, I'm not racist. My sister's boyfriend's Black, or like, oh, I have a Black friend. My neighbor's Black. It's like, I don't know if that really counts. I don't know if that constitutes you as not being racist necessarily.
It's so much worse than that though, because I know the Black people that she's talking about. And I know my father, and he would have told her any number of lies to go out and hang out with these black people because it was like Judy, it was Sue, it was Pearl, people he bought painkillers from.
Oh.
Yeah. And so all of these, and I know this because I was.
That's so funny. Oh yeah, I have black friends. My drug dealer.
Yeah, my dad introduced me to these people in my early 20s. He was a piece of shit, so he never had money for drugs, and he would connect me with people in return for me to throw him a few Lortabs. And that was how I met Pearl and Judy and Sue and several other people. Not all of whom were black, to be fair, but I'm absolutely positive that when she talks about him helping these old black people, it's because he was like, hey, I need $40 so I can buy gas and go out there and help this black lady who's being evicted move her stuff, because that's the kind of person he was. No. And my grandmother would have been like, that's such a good thing for you to do. Here's $40. No, here's $60. Go out there and you help these people. So, and he just went out there and bought drugs with it. I know this because I bought drugs from the very same people 15 years ago.
Yeah, and my point is, you know, even if it was true and he was like, whatever, helping some black people out, if a lot of his rhetoric was racist and he was like, if he was saying racist things constantly, and if he viewed black people as lesser than, even if he did at one point help black people, like help a black family or something, that doesn't mean, like, that doesn't fix all of the other things.
You're absolutely right. And I don't want to get into too many examples of how my dad was racist, but
yeah, we'll take your word for it. I mean,
there was a ball field that my sister and I were at when we were like little kids, like 5, 6 years old or whatever. And my sister asked me to do something for her, to go to the concession stand and get her something. And I said back to her, what color do I look to you? And now in hindsight, that's horrible. But
where do you learn that?
I was like 5 years old. I didn't even know what that meant.
Yeah, you heard someone say that. You didn't come up with that.
That was my dad's response when people had asked him to do stuff. Was, what color do I look to you? And that was where I learned it from.
That's so insane. That is like such a like deep South thing, because no one would ever say that up here. Like that's such like a Southern racist thing. That's insane.
And it's pervasive. It's so pervasive that it was coming out of my mouth and I didn't even know what it meant.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, kudos on me to come from that background and cast off all of that racism and stuff and move past it. But, oh my God, their worldview is about as wrong as a worldview can get.
Yeah.
There's also the fact that in the 2nd grade, I believe it was, I was sent to the principal's office for having drawn a swastika on the palm of my hand.
Jesus.
I didn't know what a swastika was.
Yeah.
But I knew my dad had one hanging on his mirror at my great-grandmother's house. I think she was actually my great-aunt. I don't remember the family relationship there. But she had a 1-bedroom apartment, and he was living in the bedroom there because he was a drug-addicted mooch his entire life and couldn't take care of himself. So he was living with my great-grandmother and milking her to death. Anyway, he had on his mirror in there an actual swastika that he had clipped out of somewhere, some book or something, and written beside it was the words, white power. And like, this is on his mirror.
That's like literal white supremacist shit.
Is. And I don't know what the stuff is. I just, you know, hey, I love my dad. My dad is so cool and he likes this symbol. So I got sent to the principal's office for that. And the principal, in addition to paddling me and making me scrub it off, told my aunt about it in school that day afterwards, because she was either working for the school or she was a substitute or something. And I remember this very vividly. She talked to me about it afterwards. She didn't even know what he was saying because he kept pronouncing it as Nazi, that I had a Nazi sign on my hand. And she didn't know what that was. So I had to draw the symbol for her to piece together. Oh, it's a Nazi symbol. And that was where we learned, oh, yes, you can't do that. Your dad has that. We're never going to talk about that.
Yeah.
But you're not allowed to that's a bad symbol and you shouldn't ever draw it again.
I mean, what does that do to a child psychologically?
I guess know what I mean? It turns them trans and makes them move to New Hampshire.
Well, I mean, like, just the dynamic between a father and a child. Like, so now you're getting this story from your other family members of, yeah, he has this symbol or he's doing these things, he's saying these things, but you're not allowed to.
Mm-hmm. And I'm getting a lot of social feedback that the things that my dad says and does are not good.
Yes. So like, I'm just thinking like, that just must be so confusing as a child. Cause it's like, well, this is my dad. And I'm like, supposed to trust him and I'm supposed to look up to him, but then like all of these other things. And I'm sure a lot of children have that experience where it's just like really confusing.
I really enjoyed playing ball and co-ed softball as a preteen and as a really early teenager, like 13, 14 years old, that kind of thing. But we got systematically removed from every single league in the area because every softball field down there had its own league. And they do co-ed softball here in New Hampshire as well. They probably do it in most places. But my father would form teams with his coworkers, and he would, get money for them to buy uniforms, and I'm going to get these uniforms, and then they would never get the uniforms, or he would never pay the money for the league fee or the tournament fee, and so eventually they'd be like, hey, you guys can't play here anymore, and this happened over and over
gosh.
and over. Like, this dude was a complete and total piece of shit, without getting into the fact that before I was even in kindergarten, when I was like 5, maybe 4 years old, I don't know how old I was, we were in 2 vehicular wrecks in a single day. And the first one was because we were being passed by an 18-wheeler. That's what we called them in the South, and that's what I continue to call them. It's a truck, really. And my father swerved, or the guy swerved into us. I don't know. My father was whacked out on painkillers and Xanax, so he probably swerved. And the big-ass mirror that they have on the sides of their trucks just smashed into the driver window and just threw glass into the vehicle. We were fine. We stopped at a gas station. He vacuumed out the glass, and amazingly continued on with our journey until we got to Memphis, Tennessee, where I don't know if he floored the accelerator as soon as it turned green, or if he just wasn't paying attention and didn't stop on time, but he rear-ended a woman, sent her careening 50 feet, it may have been 50 yards, I don't know, I was a child then, but into the intersection, broke her neck on impact.
Oh my God.
And she died on the spot. And her family, I didn't know this until recently. My grandmother actually pointed this out. Her family sued the car manufacturer because her accelerator got stuck open. And I don't know if they won that lawsuit or not, but that didn't break her neck. That isn't what killed her. That's just what caused her car to drive into another vehicle and make the wreck even worse. What killed her was my father being on painkillers and Xanax, rear-ending this lady and breaking her neck on impact. And he didn't do any time for that because she hired an attorney who convinced the judge that he didn't need prison, he needed rehab. And that didn't stick. He continued to be on drugs, as I mentioned, as when I was an adult, going around with him and buying pain pills from these old black people that he was telling my grandmother that he was helping out with things. So just a total, absolute piece of shit. No questions asked. Like this. He wasn't a good man who did some bad things. He was a bad man who occasionally probably did some good things. And that's not up for dispute as far as I'm concerned. If you want to come here and tell me differently about him, you need to have facts and not, well, your father loved you. Well, I'm not sure he did because he was like misgendering me and talking about like my penis and stuff on my sister's Facebook all the way up until he died. And I don't know what part of that to you release it, but it's immaterial. This isn't about me and my relationship with him and whether he loved me and I loved him. None of that's relevant to the question of whether or not he's a piece of shit, right? I can love someone who's a piece of shit, and I can dislike someone who's a piece of shit. And that piece of shit can love me and still be a piece of shit. Just because they love me, I'm not going to put on blinders and say, oh, well, they're really a good person because they love me. And I think this idea leads to that people should do that, leads to a lot of abuse and a lot of people subjecting themselves to abuse that isn't necessary. I want to buy a tank top. I want to have a custom tank top made that says, kill your abuser on it, right? And I'm really going to do this. And yeah, that's pretty risque, but it's self-defense as far as I can tell.
Yeah.
I'm just advocating self-defense.
But so the reason why I would disagree with that is because a lot of people are using the term abuser incorrectly. And of course, there are different levels of abuse, right? There's psychological abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, sexual abuse, like whatever. There's different levels of abuse.
There's also religious abuse, which doesn't get talked about enough.
Yeah, and I would even put that in the category of psychological abuse,
that's
right?
True. Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, like there's so many different kinds, and I would argue if somebody is like emotionally manipulating you, that's not like killing them isn't warranted.
Yeah,
if someone
I would agree.
actively attacking you, then yes, that would be self-defense.
Yeah,
But
I would agree with that entirely.
Yeah.
It's certainly meant more to make people go, wow, than it
Yeah.
is to like present a
Well,
valid
it's
lifestyle
like
choice.
it's like those like I've seen bumper stickers that say kill your local drug dealer or kill your local heroin dealer.
Right.
Because to those people who have those bumper stickers or whatever, those people are murderers. And they see them as someone who is like destroying their community and whatever. So, and then some people, like the libertarian stance on drugs is, well, you're an adult, you can do whatever you want to do.
Which is my stance. But I
Yeah.
understand where they're coming from with shoot your local heroin dealer. I don't support it.
Mm-hmm.
But like I can still understand their mentality behind
Yeah.
that. Because as you point out, they do think that they're murderers, but they're only murdering, at best, they're helping people commit suicide. Now, some of them
Yeah.
are lacing drugs and actually killing people, and like that's
Yeah.
a different matter. That's fraud, and we obviously condemn that. To say that to take an issue like that, and I'm so sorry, and this is why libertarianism sounds cold-hearted and insane, because I just described a dealer lacing heroin with fentanyl
Yeah.
as fraud. And yeah, that's true. I'm just saying fraud is the ethical reason behind why that is wrong.
Yeah.
You're misrepresenting what you're giving someone,
Yeah.
and it's going to kill them as a result.
Yeah.
And then you've murdered them as well. But the act of just telling someone, hey, I have this thing and I'm selling it to you, but it's not what it actually is fraudulent. But I don't necessarily agree. And obviously, yes, kill your abusers is not meant to be taken literally. I do want to talk quickly about religious abuse because that was why I finally blocked my grandmother a few days ago. Now, I am from Mississippi, and Mississippi is the only state in the United States where the majority of the population is a single religion. And in Mississippi, it's not just a single religion, it's a single denomination of that religion, and it's Southern Baptists. And if you're not familiar with Southern Baptists, these are the pastors, the preachers who are yelling in the pulpit, the fire and brimstone, the apocalypse is coming, repent now. And it's those types. And even within that, there was this subgroup of hysterical people brought about by my uncle, who became convinced that the Y2K was going to cause the rise of the Antichrist. Because, and look, I distinctly remember both my dad and my uncle saying this. And I know, being a tech person, how stupid what I'm about to say is. But they said, well, we know the Y2K is going to bring about the Antichrist because the computer binary code is 666.
Which is not true.
No, that's complete nonsense. It means nothing. It's not even wrong. It's
Like-
so wrong.
Yeah.
It's
I
like
don't-
saying the color blue is 37. That's how we know.
That's how
And so they believed this. And their response to this, remember, this was around the time that the Left Behind books were really popular. And if you're not familiar with those, they were written by, I think, Tim LaHaye and Terry Jenkins. And they were really popular among these fundamentalist Southern Baptist Christians because they portrayed what these Southern Baptists wanted the end of the world to be. The Antichrist was going to come. He was going to Jesus was going to save all of the Christians prior to all of this by sucking us up into the rapture, and we were going to live forever in paradise. And those people who were left behind, hence the name of one of the books, were going to have to pick up the pieces while the Antichrist rose and took over the world. But there's also several traditions of this tribulation period. There's pre-trib, post-trib, and something else. And basically, some Christians believe that Christians will be here during this period of suffering that is called the tribulation, and some don't. My family happens to believe in the rapture and believes that Jesus is going to save all of the believers, and then the tribulation is going to happen. Which is
So then what's the point of the bunker?
that's what I never understood.
Because to me, like, that doesn't sound like they have a very strong faith in God. If you think
yes.
he's going to save you, but then you need to, like, prepare.
Well, very little
You know.
of these beliefs are supported by anything that is actually in the text of the Bible.
No, of
in
course
the
it's
first
not. I
place.
mean, a lot of Christianity has nothing to do with the Bible.
Right. And
You
the
know?
whole point of the tribulation is that it's supposed to be a period of persecution for Christians. And I think on some level they recognize that. And they were like, okay, well, this is going to happen. Or maybe the rapture wasn't going to happen immediately. Or maybe it was going to happen during the trip. I don't know exactly what they believe because I don't think they know exactly what they believe.
Yeah. Well, and it was clearly very fear-led.
It was.
And that, I mean, can just get things really, messed up.
So once my uncle became convinced of this, he convinced my grandmother, who was raising me, with whom I lived at the time with my sister, that this was all going to happen. And so we and our family and our families began, there were several bunkers. There were at least 3 bunkers located in areas around where we lived that we were stocking with ammunition and canned goods and bottled water and all of this other just crazy unhinged. We were preparing for the end of the world.
I mean, I know people that do that now.
Yes.
It's a little less hysterical.
It is.
But they're like ready just in case.
Which I understand. I totally get it.
Yeah.
You
but it's
should
like the
stockpile.
military training with children and like the fear.
Yes. I've not mentioned that here on the podcast yet, but there was military stuff. What these rednecks in Mississippi thought passed for military style training, where they would like have us attempting marches out there in the woods carrying these shotguns and rifles, because it was a 12-gauge shotgun that I had. And then, instructing us on how to use these guns, which, like, kudos to them on that. That's a good thing. But that's what we were doing with our summer there between like 1998 and 1999 summers, was we were out there in the fields with our father and our uncle, who were giving us this redneck military style training. And I remember my father telling me, you're going to be patrolling overnights. We're going to take turns, and we're going to rake all the leaves out, because this was their plan. Like, these are rednecks. These are not.
But I mean, like, this is like very thought out. I'm not saying
Yes.
it's thought out well or that it makes sense or that's logical, but they like really thought it through.
They did.
And I'm just wondering, because I've heard this before, like they didn't come up with this, right? And there were a ton of different theories of like what's going to happen at Y2K with the computer shutting down, and everybody had their own theory, right? But yeah, I'm just wondering, like, where did this originate from? Like, who came up with this? Like, I'm sure your uncle took it and ran with it and had his own
did.
crazy flavor, but
It's the same kind of people who believe that Obama was the Antichrist. These people are just out there, and they're all over the South. Azria, go lay down. And they're all over the South, and I don't know where they get their ideas from. I really don't, especially in this era prior to the internet.
yeah, and that was one of my thoughts with, with the internet. It's like, these crazy conspiracy theories can spread like wildfire, but before the internet, I mean, obviously, like people's conspiracy theories still spread and people still
Right.
came up with their own nonsense, but it's just, yeah, I don't know.
Then there's the fact, of course, that I'm trans. And I've been struggling with gender identity issues and sexuality and stuff my entire life, and my family knew this. So take any normal child and put them in those circumstances where they think the world is about to end, and while everyone else is out celebrating the New Year's Eve in 1999, we're like hunkering down waiting on the world to end. Take any normal person and put them in that situation, and it's going to fuck them up.
Yeah.
But take a kid who has gender identity issues and sexuality issues and put them in that environment with those insanely psychotic Christians who are, they're the gay conspiracy kind of believing people. And it's just a recipe for disaster. I became an adult, though, and I realized I don't have to put up with this. I don't have to deal with this. I don't have to have it in my life. I moved 1,700 miles to New Hampshire, not really to get away from them, but at the same time, I did get away from them, and I've had no desire to have any real connection with them since. And I remember all of these things that they subjected me to, not just with this crazy religious antichrist bullshit, but in a lot of the anti-trans bullshit that they subjected me to. And
So when
just
did you transition?
as an adult,
Yeah, but I knew that, but were you
I began transitioning before I moved.
Okay.
But transitions are, it's a transition.
Yeah,
So
of course, it's like a process.
It begins at first, like you still work as a male while you go to work, and then you come home at night and you change clothes and you sort of live this double life for a while. And eventually you get to a point where you just no longer live that double life.
Yeah.
And I did that at the same time that I moved to New Hampshire, because that was the easiest thing to do. And like that worked out. And I don't know exactly, I think I've completed as much as one ever completes a transition like 6-7 years ago when I moved to New Hampshire. And prior to that, it was like a 3 to 4 year period of transitioning slowly. Mm-hmm. But they knew about it, and my sister knew about it, because once I decided I wanted to transition, she was the first person I told about it. And she sent me, even though we were in like the same house together at the time, right? Like we lived together at the time. She sent me a 7-part text message in response that I still have screenshots of that were just so fucked up about how she wasn't going to have it in her life. I wasn't going to be allowed to have any contact with my nephew because it was going to destroy his innocence. And they're raising their nephew to be a Christian, and they don't support that kind of thing. And, so I was like, all right, well, that sucks, but it's going to be what it's going to be. And I ended up moving, cut her out of my life, never had anything really to do with her until I ran for sheriff. And that was when she reached out to me because she's an admin of this makeup group that with like 70,000, maybe more members. And when I ran for sheriff, all of her friends in her makeup group began talking about me. And like, oh my God, this bitch is running for sheriff, or fuck the police. This is amazing. This is awesome. And she got to say, oh my God, guys, that's my sister. And that was when she reached out to me. And I was like, I'm so proud of you and all this other bullshit. But I've never forgotten the way that all of this progressed.
Could you?
Right. Like this, you wanted nothing to do with me until it benefited you to be able to say that I'm your sister. And it was because I was trans. And I'm never going to forget that. Then it gets worse. She found out that I was successful. And if I go through my Facebook messages for the last 3 years, I would bet that 90% of my messages from her were her asking me for money.
I had a feeling you were going there.
Yeah, and she's probably, quote, borrowed close to $8,000 to $10,000 from me at this point that I'm just never going to see again. And I know I'm never going to see it again. And I knew it when I gave it to her that I was never going to see it again, but that wasn't the point. She's helped me a lot throughout my life, and I've helped her a lot throughout my life. I don't think we can really quantify who has done the most for the other, but for the last several years, she's only contacted me if she wanted money. And she would dead name me at the same fucking time. She's got to go on Facebook and search for Aria. And then she proceeds to type
a different name.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
it's like, my preferred name. It's right there.
Yes. And it's my actual legal name on my driver's license, on my bank accounts, on my Facebook. There's no connection to this dead name anywhere any longer at this point. So blocking her, cutting her out has been a long time coming. I didn't want to do it because of my nephew. I love my nephew to death. And if I could tell my nephew anything, it's that you don't have to live the way that she is teaching you to live. Like, she knows how all of this trauma that we endured as children with our mother's abusive boyfriends that would beat the shit out of her and would threaten her and yell at her and scream at her and throw her through windows and shit. She's dating people who are exactly like that, right?
It's just so complicated because these cycles, and before we were on the air, I was talking about generational trauma, and like this is why, because these cycles of generational trauma will keep repeating themselves until someone like you breaks the cycle, and you're like, no, I'm going to do something else or whatever. But it is so hard. Like, I do have a lot of like softness for those people because it is so hard when all you know is trauma and abuse. It is really difficult to like figure that out cognitively and do something different. And it's almost like when we're talking about like abusive partners, right? It's almost like sometimes our past like attracts those kinds of people. So it's almost like, I don't want to call anybody a victim because I hate like the victim mentality, but it's almost like some people are just open for abusers and abusers sniff that out and they just target these people. So it has to be a big transformation sometimes for people to like effectively shift their life. And it is just so sad when it is affecting children and when it's just affecting people. It's just so hard and so complicated.
And there's so many stories. A friend of mine, his nephew, who he knows is unhinged, went to jail recently, and he's going to go to prison for a very long time because he stabbed his girlfriend with a sword.
Oh my God.
Several times and killed her. And what he told the police was, well, hitting her wasn't working, so I had to try something else. And like a long history of him hitting this girl to try to make her into whatever it was he wanted to be, or just because
she stayed and no one did anything about it
until eventually he killed her. And that story is alarmingly common. It's the same thing that happened with my mother. She dated one abusive guy after the other until one of them finally killed her.
Yeah.
And it's probably going to happen to my sister as well.
So sad. Like, it is so sad. But it's important for people. I don't know. I think it's just important for us to let people know and like to try to empower people
Yep.
that they can change their situation, you know? And so this is kind of like a separate topic, but I used to be a nurse at a drug and alcohol rehab. And we would get, it was like a revolving door, like same patients over and over and over again. They'd come in, get clean, relapse, come in, get clean, relapse over and over again. And I told some of my patients, like, listen, if you're serious about getting clean, if you're serious about getting your kids back and not being homeless and like having a good life, you need to stop doing the things that you're doing, right? You need to cut family members off if they're using. You need to stop seeing that piece of shit boyfriend. You need to like cut every single person in your life off who is using or enabling you. You need to, I mean, I had people that I knew who moved to Florida or wherever, like moved across the country just to get away from their friends and family and all of the drug dealers and connections they had up here. Like sometimes you literally need to remove yourself from the situation. And I know it's hard when there's children involved and people don't have money and, you know, it's like so complicated. So I don't want to pretend like it's this easy thing, just like, oh, move to California and get away from all the drugs or your abusive partner or whatever. But
because it's certainly not easy, but
no,
you're
but
absolutely right.
It's like, are you going to die or are you going to like really figure out how to do something that's difficult and make these major shifts in your life?
Yep. You have to get away from the abusers and you have to get away from the enablers.
Yeah.
And that's not easy to do. It can be extremely difficult to do. And they have so many tools at their disposal to try to make you stay.
Yeah.
And I saw this with my grandmother saying, well, if you really have no love for your family, then go ahead and block it. Like, I don't think she realizes that she was already on like her second chance. And the only reason I gave them that second chance was because I have friends and family here who do love me and who like insulate me against their bullshit and their abuse. And that's a really minor example, but that's the same exact line that you will hear from your abusive boyfriend or your abusive girlfriend. Yeah. If you really love me, you won't walk out that door.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. It's like, it's highs and lows, right? So it's like with a lot of these abusive partners, it's like the good is really, really great.
Yep.
And then the lows are getting beat up and stabbed with a sword. You know, it's like this horrible cycle. And obviously, like, that's a very dramatic example. But even with the abusive family where it's like blackmailing and threatening and coercing, like, well, I'm your family, so you just have to put up with it.
Yep, but you don't.
No, you don't. You can just cut your family members off. And this was another thing we were talking about before we were recording, where like sometimes people will like do that little willy-nilly and I mean, like, whatever, it's your decision as a human being. Like, you can cut off whoever you want to cut off. But
I would prefer it to be warranted. If you're going to remove someone from your life, I feel like you should have a really good reason for that.
Yeah, especially if it's family. Like, I don't know, I'm like a really big family person, but I also don't think that being family should excuse abusive behavior. And it's just like, well, you have to have your father or your grandmother in your life, even though they're abusing you, just because, you know, like they're your family. So, and they love you, you know, like that's excusing abuse.
We know Uncle Tommy looks at your daughter a little weirdly, but he's family. What are you going to do? No, get Uncle Tommy the hell out of here before I break his neck. Not really, obviously, because I'm not a violent person, but like you have situations like that where a family member, their messed up behavior, their abuse, or just their creepiness, their shady behavior is just being ignored because they're family, or you're expected to subject yourself to it because this person is family. But that's it. If you're removing people from your life, the example that you gave at the beginning was over politics. And like, that's a crazy reason, I think, to cut someone out of your life, considering how easy it is to just not talk about politics. And I realize the people out there, but my Trump supporting uncle is going to talk about Trump at the family get together.
Well, it goes beyond that though, because they think like a lot of women, these are like whatever, the protected people, right? Like trans people, women, any gay people, black people, whatever, minorities. Some of these people that are in that camp literally think that for some reason Donald Trump getting reelected, because he's been the president before, right?
Yeah, and
now
we
this
weren't-
Donald Trump being president is going to kill them. They think that they are in legitimate danger. They think that they're going to be rounded up and put in concentration camps, executed in the streets. Like, I've heard insane things.
They thought the same thing in 2016. None of that shit happened.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen now. And I understand, though, and I feel bad for you, because if you believe that, we mentioned abuse and cutting out your abusers. If you genuinely believe that Trump is going to round up the gay people or the disabled people or whatever and send them to concentration camps, you are a victim of severe abuse.
And Donald Trump was not the one abusing you.
Someone has found a way to emotionally manipulate you, and they are just beating you to death.
Well, that was the whole Kamala campaign.
Yeah,
was like fear mongering, and if you don't vote this way, you're a bad person, you're a bigot, you're homophobic, and so many, you know, especially young people who are like very susceptible to that type of marketing, and they're like still like forming who they are as a human being. They're like, well, I don't want to be a bad person, you know, and when there's influences of their friends and whatever. Yeah.
It comes back to Greta Thunberg again, who we've talked about here on Free Talk Cast before, who said, as you pointed out then, you stole my childhood, was the line that she used. But it wasn't the people who changed the climate who stole her childhood. It was the people who traumatized her to the point where she is obsessed with climate change, and it's all she can think about at every waking moment of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I'm only like, whatever, 5, 6, or 7 years older than her, and my childhood wasn't ruined by climate change. And I'm sure a lot of millennials and Gen Z people can agree. Like,
no,
the climate didn't steal your childhood. Some weirdo freak that, you know, abused you did.
Exactly. But it's hard when you're being abused like that so consistently and so subtly. Like, I don't think she would be able to point to any one person who just like beat all of these ideas.
Well, it's probably
into
the
her
internet.
head.
And I think she's autistic, so she probably
parents.
like got obsessed with it. Like that might have been her obsession thing, where it was like, oh, the climate, the climate.
Her parents are climate change activists, apparently.
Oh, are they? So I didn't know this.
So from the time she was born, she had the media, the school systems over there in whatever, I think Scotland. I don't remember where she's from.
I don't know.
Whatever school system in whatever European country, because we have the same climate change alarmism here in the United States schools. Her parents, her family, the news media, the internet, all of them beating this into her head her entire life. It's no wonder she was traumatized.
It's also like disgusting to parade her around. Like she's like the poster child for like, oh my God, look at, she's so brave. It's like, no, this is like, let her, you are stealing her childhood. Let her be a kid.
And if you're going around genuinely believing that the Trump administration, if you're wrapped in the same sort of hysteria and the same obsessed fear-mongering worldview that she's wrapped in, then you are likewise a victim of some kind of abuse. And I don't know who did that. I don't know who convinced you and who sat around telling you that the world was about to end and that Donald Trump was going to kill all the gay people. I don't know. It may not have been one person. It may have been just a lot of people planting little seeds in your head over time. Regardless, you're a victim of abuse. And like all victims of abuse, you've got to cut those abusers out of your life. And it's probably on the internet, really. It's probably on TikTok and probably not Twitter, but TikTok and YouTube.
Well, they don't use Twitter anymore.
And Snapchat.
They use,
does anyone use Twitter anymore?
Well, no, the leftists started their own Twitter called Blue Sky or something.
Oh, that's right. They did. Yeah. Yeah. Mastodon exists, though, and it continues to work
I don't
fine.
think they'd like that.
Well, we have our own Mastodon server.
There's too much free speech over there.
There is, but you can disconnect from those people who are saying things you don't like, and you can block them, just like you can on every social media
just
platform.
like you can on Twitter?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, no kidding.
And just like you can abusers who are reaching out to you. Just hit that block button. That's what I did. That's what I did to my sister, which, again, was long overdue. And she ended up, to get back to the story, she ended up messaging me, you don't need to post every single thing you think on the internet. And I was like, well, I'm going to. She was like, this really hurt our grandmother and you owe her some respect and an apology. I was like, well, I'm not doing any of those things. And I'm not going to change what I have to say. If she doesn't like it, she can stop reading my posts. And I'm not going to change what I'm saying because she might read it or because you might read it. And she said something back. I was like, well, look, I would just as soon block you as continue this conversation with you. So know that before you respond again. And she responded again. And I was like, oh, all right, block, done. Get out of my life. And that, again, long overdue from years of only contacting me if she wanted money.
Yeah. Or to scold you for your Facebook status.
Yeah, but that was the only time she had done that.
Yeah.
So there is that going for her, but dead naming me while asking me for money on occasion. There were several times where she would actually say, hey, this is Logan, my nephew, and can I have some money to pay for this subscription service or whatever? And I don't know if it was really my nephew or not. I have no way of knowing, but
Yeah.
like, that's so unbelievably fucked
Also,
up in the
like,
first place.
I would never let my kid message somebody asking for money.
Yeah, yeah, that's
Like, that's
true.
that's, you know what I mean? Like, I wouldn't
pretty
want to teach them
trashy.
that. Yeah, it's just like everything about that is unfortunate.
So that was long overdue. My grandmother, less long overdue, but, she was one of the main perpetrators of this religious abuse as I was growing up. And, I don't have to put up with it in my
Yeah.
life. Neither do you. And that's the important takeaway here, that it can be difficult to recognize abuse for what it is. And when I talk about some of this Y2K stuff, I can hear people out there saying, how dare you even call that abuse? But
I would call that abuse.
I
I mean,
would
what
tend
you
to agree.
described is insane.
Yes, absolutely insane. But they give religion in particular a pass, as though like it's so normalized that it can't be considered abuse. But you probably just don't know to the extent that some of these religious people can take
Well, and that's the thing too. I think some people are used to like, normal Christians who are just like going to church, whatever, and they're like normal, good people and whatever. Like I have a ton of Christian friends and Catholic friends who like the stories you describe, they wouldn't even believe.
Yeah.
So I think that's
is good.
important to recognize that there are so many different sects of Christianity in any religion. So it's like,
Yeah.
just because you had a good experience in the church doesn't mean that other people weren't literally abused in the church. I mean, it's a whole thing that priests have been molesting little boys for centuries. You know what I mean? So it's like,
Yeah.
let's not act like there isn't abuse going on in the church.
Absolutely. And like all abuse, you should cut it out your life at the first opportunity. Just don't put up with it. Cut it out and walk away, because it never ends, right? And I know that's what people think, that, oh, well, he hit me once, but he'll never do it again. He apologized, and he's done it once in 4 years. He'll never do it. He will do it again. And then it will become more common, and then it will escalate, and it will but it could lead to your death. At the very least, it will destroy your spirit. And there's no need to subject yourself to it. You can end the abuse. I wish I had some resources to throw at you, like call this 800 line or go to this website.
But I'm sure there are a ton.
Yeah.
If you're accessing this on the internet.
Yeah. But at the end of the day, you have to be ready to make that decision anyway. Like having a link to some women's abuse organization isn't going to help you if you're not ready.
That's a great point, because with anything, like drug addiction or abuse or whatever, there are so many resources available and they're so easy to access. But it's really the most important thing is the person's readiness and willingness.
Right. So be ready and be willing. And thank you for listening. I really feel like it was kind of a downer episode, but also kind of an important one. Like these topics need to be talked about, and you should know that you don't deserve to be abused. And that's all there is to it. So thank you for listening. Like, share, subscribe, all of that great stuff. And I feel a little less dirty about saying that this
See,
time.
yeah,
So,
you're getting acclimated.
maybe the more I say it, the less dirty I feel. So do that, because we are still growing the YouTube channel very slowly. And, follow us on all of the places. We need to make all of the places because we don't have them. I mean, we kind of do. Anyway, not important. So thank you for listening. Have a good weekend.